I mean, come on. It was aliens. Obviously, it was aliens, guys. You're listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents to Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. Is that door shut?
Yeah, and I'm breaking the cardinal rule of podcasting.
All right.
Having a glass of wine
At the beginning
on
of the
segment
show.
1. Get ready, folks.
So we're taking a break from the book report this week. We have a lot of things to report here. So first of all, we'll say congratulations to our buddy Ty. Who
Yeah, buddy.
Many of you probably know from us mentioning him on the show. He was a first call-in, first-time caller, long-time listener, first-time caller.
That's right.
Only caller ever.
Except for Randall.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Randall is a... but yeah, so he got married. He and we, of course, attended the wedding and had duties, and Kyle was
Rock
like...
and roll.
Yeah, Kyle was like in the wedding party, plus we played music, and so we did that.
Threw down.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was.
Yep. And Lisa is really awesome.
Yes,
so good.
she is.
And yeah, I think we talked about the engagement party on the show too. So it happened, folks.
Yeah, that's right. And the other thing I want to mention, I want to give a shout out to our buddy John Brzezinski. He's godfather to Soul, Kyle's child, and he passed away. When was it? Like this past week? Or the week before?
Like a week ago,
Yeah.
Saturday.
Yeah. John was amazing. Awesome photographer. I knew he was a photographer, but I hadn't really seen, the genius of his prints until we were over at their house the other day after the funeral. And his wife was showing us some of the prints that he got, this really awesome printer. And God, the captures he got I mean, just amazing. Also, great musician, also like a guitar tech. So like he many of you may have seen the guitars that are sometimes hanging in the back, on when we do video shows or when we're on Cosmographia. And I've seen lots of people ask, what is that? Is that a P90 on that?
Yeah, that American Telecaster has a P90 pickup on it and a Seymour Duncan quarter pounder that John, I mean, he just basically, he threw that thing onto his countertop and took it apart and then grabbed a router and just right in the kitchen, just routed out the hole for the pickup. It scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was great. He knew everything about, like, all the technical details about the components that go into the electronics of a guitar, where they were manufactured and why the better ones came from this manufacturing plant in Korea and where they sourced their copper and all that. I mean, it's just crazy. And, most people that knew him probably didn't even have any idea that he knew anything about guitars, but he had awesome amps and guitars. And every time we'd go over there, he'd be like, "Hey, come to the back room, check this out."
Yeah.
And he
liked to crank it to 11.
Oh yeah, he was always cranked to 11. I could barely jam the way he'd turn it up, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I'd turn the volume knob on the guitar to like 2. Yeah, he was great. Great cook.
Yep.
Great photographer.
Excellent coffee.
Family man.
He was a coffee aficionado.
Great builder.
Yeah.
He was an amazing carpenter and loved fast cars and
That's right. He's also
loud
a car
guitars
dude.
and just
loud guitars and fast cars.
and guns.
Yes, lots of guns. Yeah.
Great guy, and we're gonna miss him.
That's right. So yeah, shout out to you, John, wherever you are on your next adventure.
And to the family.
And to the
We
family.
love all of you.
Yeah. So what else do we have? We have any agricultural update?
The farm is mud.
That's right.
That's all.
It's That's right.
That is all.
A lot of rain here recently, folks.
The pond is full.
That's right. Yeah, and I guess the trees. Oh, dang it! I didn't set this. The trees out in the other place where we planted the olive trees, they didn't do too well in the freeze. So we'll see what happens with that. I don't think they completely died, but yeah, they definitely froze above ground. So we'll see how that goes. Saved them from the ants, but we couldn't save them from the weather.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so but yes, you're right, everything is mud. So I guess that's we're done with the agricultural update. So let's go ahead and do space weather news. Less mud in space. From spaceweather.com, all quiet alert. Yesterday's weak CME impact barely disturbed Earth's magnetic field. Today, quiet has resumed. No geomagnetic storms are expected for the next 3 days. And also, there's an article here on noctilucent cloud season that is getting longer. NLC season is getting longer. New data from NASA's AIM spacecraft show the first NLCs of summer have been trending earlier since the spacecraft was launched in 2007. Interestingly, the season is not also ending later. It still stops in August. Nevertheless, the early start is giving skywatchers an extra 5 days a year of noctilucent clouds. In recent years, NLCs have spilled as far south as Los Angeles and Las Vegas, setting records for low-latitude sightings. And mid-June to July is when the clouds are most widespread, so observing tip, look west 30-plus minutes after sunset. If you see luminous blue-white tendrils spreading across the sky, you may have spotted a noctilucent cloud. So, man, if it's all the way to Los Angeles, I wonder if we could see them down into Vegas.
Yeah, we should be.
Yeah.
Should be able to. Oh, yeah. What's the conditions up there?
All right. Current conditions. Solar wind speed 308.7 kilometers per second, and the density is 13.5 protons per cubic centimeter. Current sunspot number is 30. Neutron count is 9.3% above the space age average. And KP index is 0 right now, which is rated as quiet, and the 24-hour max was 3, also quiet. So there you have it.
All right. Thank you. So I have this this solar cycle story. It's very long, but I kind of want to read it.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of other stories too, but I mean, this is a kind of a long one, and I was thinking maybe I'll put it off, but
Go for it.
yeah, I think I should go for it.
Let's hear it.
So this is from space.com, and hopefully I don't get all the pop-ups and stuff that mess me up. So apologies in advance if that happens. Solar activity refers to the state of the sun's magnetic field and associated phenomena. Sunspots, flares, solar wind, and coronal ejections. During periods of minimal solar activity, such events are often uncommon and weak. During solar maximum, they're at their strongest and most frequent. Magnetic field fluctuations on the sun can happen on drastically different timescales, ranging from seconds all the way to billions of years. When astronomers speak of the slowdown or a period of quiescence in the sun's activity, it doesn't mean that the sun will stop shining, but that there's a slowdown in activity. The sun has one particular rhythm lasting approximately 11 years in which its polar magnetic field flips polarity. Sunspots serve as an indicator of this change. Indeed, it's often known as the sunspot cycle. Although sunspots themselves were first observed in detail by Galileo, Christoph Scheiner, and others from 1609 onwards, according to the British Library, the cyclical nature of their appearance and disappearance was first noted in 1775 by Danish astronomer Christian Horebo. It was then rediscovered in 1843 by Heinrich Schwab. In 1848, Swiss astronomer Rudolf Wolf used Schwab and others' results, as well as performing his own observations, to calculate the 11-year cycle and a mathematical method to count the number of sunspots. This so-called Wolf number remains in use today, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Many other astronomers at the time either independently observed this cycle or were inspired by the results of others. Wolf's own calculation of the 1755 to 1766 sunspot cycle was labeled as the first, and each sunspot cycle since then has been progressively numbered as such. We are now in cycle 25. But sometimes the spots don't appear at all. This was the case for 80 days of the first 6 months of the current solar cycle, which started in December 2019. It was greater still for the same period in cycle 24, where there were 281 spot-free days. The period from 1645 to 1715 saw a near total crash in sunspot numbers, where they could literally be counted on two hands. Wolf struggled to piece together solar cycles before the mid-1700s because of this dearth of information. Dearth? Dearth? But it didn't mean sunspots weren't being observed. Many distinguished astronomers of the age, such as Giovanni Cassini, continued to make observations. This 70-year solar lull was later noted by German astronomer Gustav Sporer, which then later inspired the British-Irish husband and wife team Edward and Annie Maunder. The period has since been named the Maunder Minimum, according to Encyclopedia Britannica. There have been other lulls before and since, such as the Sporer and Dalton minima. However, Madhulika Gutakarta, a heliophysicist at NASA speaking in a personal capacity, questioned how the technology available then affected observations. Quote, during the Maunder minimum, when we could not detect any sunspots, the question remains, how well could we detect very faint sunspots then or even now? End quote. We don't know and have no measure of that. The uncertainty associated with detecting no sunspots is much harder than counting them during solar maximum. Right? So during the Maunder minimum, I think is what they're saying, is people were saying there were no sunspots, but other people were still observing them. So that like some people could see them, some people couldn't.
They're real small,
and
like
maybe short-lived.
Atmospheric, yeah.
But during solar maximum, it's a much easier to count, right? Because there's, you may not be worried about such tiny little fluctuations or something. I don't know. That's the idea I got.
Or you're missing the small ones during the maximum.
Maybe so.
I was also thinking. Yeah.
So in 2020, cycle 25 had 80% more sunspots overall than the equivalent period for cycle 24, suggesting that the current cycle may in fact be stronger rather than weaker. The International Solar Cycle 25 Prediction Panel said in September 2020 that they expect cycle 25 to be about as strong as cycle 24. Has the consensus changed since then, or is it still the same? The consensus has not changed, panel co-chair Doug Biesecker told All About Space, which is, I guess, the name of a show or something, All About Space. The consensus is still that the current cycle will be much like cycle 24. We have not seen anything that differs significantly in the early stages of this cycle that varies from the panel prediction of a peak of 115 sunspots in July 2025. The predictions, so the prediction is a peak of 115 sunspots in July of 2025. The predictions are based on the 13-month smoothed sunspot number, a statistical method for calculating sunspots. And you have to be patient when studying the sun. As Biesecker said, quote, it can take up to 3 years after the cycle begins before we can say with confidence whether the prediction is still valid, end quote. I got to figure out how to pronounce this guy's name. Guhatakurta believes this cycle is not out of the ordinary. Looking at sunspots as a non-physical index of solar activity, I think this solar cycle isn't unusual, especially in the context of the prior cycle. This cycle's sort of mimicking that. Even in the early 1800s and 1900s, you see cycles of this magnitude. He said. So, successfully predicting solar weather is certainly essential when testing scientific theories about how the sun works. But there's a more pressing practical reason for doing so. Strong solar flare events and coronal mass ejections, most likely to occur around the time of solar maxima, can disrupt modern technology. The flux of high-energy particles can damage spacecraft, satellites, and even ground-based power systems. The latter are particularly vulnerable as solar radiation easily disturbs Earth's magnetic field.